Hello everybody, Mrs. Love here. Welcome to History Class, Friday, November 10th, 2017. Today we are in Unit 4, Lesson 4, which is Chapter 36 in your book. So hopefully you read the chapter last night. We're going to go through the highlights. So as we go through this lesson, think about this. Where do we get our news? We're going to be talking about news and how it is shared in our society and comparing that back to the way it was shared at the turn of the 1900s. Our objectives today. We're going to learn what is muckraking and how is it related to free press. We're going to discuss free press in a democratic society, define what a muckraker is, and talk about one of the most famous muckrakers, S.S. McClure. So where do we get our news from? So maybe you want to pause for a minute and just jot down some ideas. Where do you get your news from? Pause, and when you come up with a few ideas, come on back and start the video over. So maybe you get your news from the television, the radio, newspapers, not so much anymore, but still, magazines. Maybe you get your news from the internet, on news websites or through social media outlets, or other social or other outlets like YouTube channels and so forth. So there's lots of different places where we can find our news today. But back in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, this is the way most news was delivered. Take a look at the pictures here. Mostly what you're seeing here are newspapers, periodicals, magazines, pamphlets, and those sorts of things. Remember, there was no television, there was no radio, and absolutely no internet. All right, so as a U.S. citizen, you have the right to express your opinions in public. You can express them by talking about them or by publishing them in newspapers, magazines, and books. So last week during one of our PLT sessions, I did a little enrichment activity with you about the First Amendment, and this is what we're going to be talking a little bit more about today. If you are not in that session, don't worry, we're going to go over the important parts here. So the First Amendment to the Constitution, also known as Article 1 of the Bill of Rights, guarantees us these freedoms. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. What does that mean? Well, during our little enrichment session last week, we really dove into each of those things and talked about them. Basically, today we're going to focus, though, on the freedom of speech and the press. Okay, so grab your history journal, and I want you to jot down these questions and write your ideas for the answers. You can pause this video while you're doing that. So I want you to write down first, why do you think it is important for people to feel free to express their opinions in public? Next, what do you think would happen if this freedom were restricted, or if people didn't have that freedom? And then finally, do you think a democracy can exist without free press? And remember, when we're talking about press, we're talking about the ability to share news information no matter what medium you use, whether it's newspaper, magazine, television, or whatever. So write down your answers, pause this for a couple minutes, and then come back. Okay, so if we are going to have this democracy as our founding fathers wanted us to, and we are going to be self-governed, we need to be informed. We need to know what's going on. So that is the role of the media or the press, okay? At the turn of the century in the 1900s, the country was experiencing a lot of growth, and we've been talking about this, how we've been changing from a farming society into an industrial society, and how we are going from like the rural farm areas into growing big urban cities. We have a lot of different cultures coming together because of all of the immigration. And what we have been finding out lately is there's a lot of corruption between the government and big businesses. So because of all these changes, the American people really need information. They really wanted information. And this was done through the press or the news media, however you want to refer to it. Later, it becomes known as the fourth branch of government. Okay, so right now we have the three major branches of government are, of course, our president, our Congress, and our courts. Those are the three main branches of government. But now we're talking about the press is becoming this unofficial fourth branch of our government. So maybe you can grab a piece of paper or write this in your journal. I want you to write down kind of the couple of things we just talked about real quick. What kind of media did they have back then? And what kind of media do we have now? And see if any of those are the same. I know we already know a lot of them are different, but see how many you can come up with that maybe are the same. All right, you can pause this and come back after you're done. Okay, so back at this time, we had a lot of press getting involved in all these different areas of our society. And this was an exciting time for people who are writers. So we're going to watch a really quick video. This is one of those silly shmoop videos. I'm going to try to put the link into the Edpuzzle. If it's not there, go to your online school to this lesson, which is lesson 4 in unit 4, and look for the link there. So pause this, go to another tab on your computer and watch the video, and then come on back. Okay, so that was kind of silly, but it gave us some good information. So let's just take a look at what we learned here. The writers who worked for the press, who were investigating the corruption in the government and in big business at this time, were called muckrakers. So it looks like I have a little typo here. So muck is dirt. Okay, so when we hear the word muck, we're just talking about dirt, like muddy, yucky dirt. But muckrakers were journalists who wrote about wrongs. Sorry about all those typos there. I'll have to fix that in the slides. But they wrote about all the wrong things that they saw going on in the world, in business, in government. They wrote about injustices, unfairness, and corruption. They wrote about those mighty industrial tycoons and how some of them broke the law and got away with it, and why that cost the public great sums of money. The muckrakers developed a new kind of journalism called investigative journalism. Just at a time when improved publishing techniques made it possible to produce a magazine, distribute it widely, and sell it for as little as 10 cents. So as you can imagine, it was really easy to get these magazines. Everyone seemed to like reading the muckrakers' articles. That made them very influential and very important. And they actually, in the end, helped bring about a lot of good changes. Okay? So take a minute and write down the word muckraker in your journal and write down what you think is the correct definition based on what I've just shared with you. So, what did muckrakers have in common with one another? Well, they were usually really good writers. They weren't just anybody. These are people who knew how to write. They were also really careful and good researchers. They took their time looking for the information. Remember, we're calling them investigative journalists. So when we think of investigators, We think of like a detective or somebody who really digs into the information to find out what it's all about. And they cared. They cared a lot about making our country a better place. All right, so here's another word for your journal. Investigative journalism. Look up on page 180 in your book and write down a definition. Go ahead, pause the video once you get that written down, and then come on back. Okay, so we're going to meet a couple of our muckrakers. This one, her name is Ida Tarbell, and in our book, they talk all about her. She is one of the first and most famous muckrakers. She started off her career as a teacher, but later became a writer. And she was recruited by a guy named Sam McClure to work for his magazine called McClure's. And we'll find out more about her later, but what we do know is she worked very hard to take on big oil companies because of all the corruption. And in the end, her investigative journalism helped create safer working conditions and better wages for all workers. Now, the guy that she worked for, this Sidney S.S. McClure, he was the founder of McClure's magazine, which actually still exists today in a little bit of a different medium. But he made it possible for good writers to earn a living writing and investigating and writing these exposés or these detective-like articles. And he worked with Ida Tarbell to expose corruption in big business and government. I think my time's going to run out on this video, guys, so you're going to have to go back to Edpuzzle and look for part 2. Nope, maybe not. Okay, I'm watching the timer. I thought at 12 minutes that my time was going to run out. Okay, hopefully there is no part 2 now. Let's keep going. All right, so what I would like you to do now is review chapter 35 in your book. Go into your online school, complete Unit 4, Lesson 4, graded assignment. That's your regular graded assignment like always. Please keep up on your guided notes. Okay. And for tomorrow, I want you to read chapter 37, or for Monday. This is for Monday. Make sure you have submitted all of the graded assignments for this week in Unit 4, Lessons 1, 2, and 3. If you have any questions or any issues, you can drop me an email. I will probably check emails sometime over the weekend, but I will not be available on Friday. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you all on Monday.